20 Most Unexplained and Paranormal Stories. What is the most unexplained, supernatural, or paranormal event you've ever witnessed? 1. I heard my 2-year-old daughter talking in her room in the middle of the night. I went in and asked her what she was doing. She said, talking to Samantha. She's on the ceiling. My wife had miscarried a few months prior. It was a girl. We were going to name her Samantha. 2. You should know that I consider myself to be a very rational person. I'm not superstitious, and I don't believe in psychic powers or the supernatural. My best friend, Travis, and I used to play guitars together almost every day. That's not important now, but it will be later. One day we decided to go to the beach with our girlfriends and take some mushrooms. After a little while, when the mushrooms were kicking in, Travis said that he wanted to wander off alone, so I stayed with our girlfriends. We all had a great time. As the sun began to set, Travis' girlfriend asked me, "Where's Travis?" None of us knew where he was, but I could hear him playing the guitar, so I suggested that we just follow the sound of the music until we got to him. The girls told me that I must have really good hearing, because they couldn't hear anything. I said, well, I can definitely hear it, so just follow me. Now here's the strange part. I followed the sound for several minutes, into the forest, and went directly to him, but when we reached him, he did not have a guitar, and I realized that we had left our guitars at home. I still have no idea how that happened. 3. My dad died in a house fire in 1991. I was home at the time, on the other side of the house from him. He was sleeping at the time. When I tried to wake him to get him out of the house by breaking a window and trying to jump into his room, I heard him say something, but I don't know what. I never told anyone in the family that he woke up, and the firefighters/doctors or whoever, I really don't remember, said he never did wake up. He didn't die immediately. It was 3 days later, of smoke inhalation. A few days after he died, my sister told me she had a dream where he wanted her to let me know that he was telling me to get away from the house. I've still never told her he woke up. Edit to answer the questions asked. Some details re/u/pm_me_your_marxisms. Questions. The part of the house where I was a converted garage, and I was goofing around on a new Super Nintendo I had just gotten, so I didn't notice anything for a while, until it had started to get out of hand. Also, no fire alarms. When I heard the noise of the fire, I had no idea what it was, and opened the door from the family room, former garage, into the kitchen, and there was fire everywhere. So, first I made sure to get my grandmother, her dog, and my friend out. As an aside, and this is where things get absurd, a friend was visiting to play the fancy new Super Nintendo. He had also recently broken his leg in a motorcycle accident, so he had to hop across the lawn when he left. After I got them out, as I remember it, I tried going around the back from the garage to the porch, to get in the dining room. No good. Fire/smoke. Then further down the porch, to get in the bathroom, couldn't reach that window. Then I went back around to the front door. Locked. We never used it. Always went in and out through the converted garage. Then finally, to my dad's room, where I tried to jump in, and got myself knocked back by the smoke. I believe I yelled first, waking him up. 2. This leads to 2. He wouldn't have had his door locked, but would have had it closed. But then when I woke him, I suppose he tried to go out of his room, which is why there would have been smoke knocking me back out the window. And he was a deep sleeper, so I can imagine he was already confused before he opened the door to the hall, letting in the smoke/heat. And then to /u/blinged out chest hairs follow up. I was already 20 at the time, back on winter break from college. So his child, but not a child, if you see what I mean. And, unfortunately, yes, it's true. These days, 20 plus years on, most of the shock, anger, and all that stuff has faded. Mostly what gets me upset now is when I sit back and think about how much I would have wanted him to meet my children, and they him. 4. I'm late to this thread, but reading some of these has compelled me to post. This isn't my story but my mom's. She is an extremely rational person, but this event caused her to have such severe panic attacks that she had to return and live with her parents for 6 months. All of this happened a few years before I was born. My mom's first husband was a Navy pilot during the Gulf War. The carrier was about 10 days into its cruise and operating with complete radio silence. She hadn't heard anything from the ship since it left, but that was to be expected. This was a war. On that night, about 10 days into the cruise, my mom woke up suddenly in the middle of the night. She saw her husband standing in the room. It wasn't an ethereal form either. He appeared solid and utterly the same. The only thing different about him was that his head was shaved. He only had one thing to say, goodbye. This whole experience startled my mom and she couldn't get back to sleep. She went to the kitchen to get some water when the doorbell rang. All military wives know what the late night doorbell means. Her husband had suffered a massive heart attack and died aboard the carrier. She was grief-ridden but reasoned that the apparition had been a hallucination born of the stress of having a spouse deployed. Besides, with his head shaved, he didn't even look that familiar. Her mother and mother-in-law flew out immediately to plan for the funeral and receive the body. She stayed strong until the first viewing of the body. Her lifeless husband was bald. In a letter from his NFO, the shaved head was explained as the result of a lost bet. There had been no way of knowing that his head had been shaved, and my mom suffered a minor mental break. 5. My wife and I were getting dinner on the table. Our 4-year-old son was in the adjoining room and said, "Hey, that's the job I had in my last life." He's looking at the TV, and there is a man shaping metal over a fire. We were shocked because we had never discussed reincarnation with him, or even with each other, in his presence. We're atheists. I tried to get him to elaborate, but he just went back to what he was doing like he never said it. 6. During most of my life my mother ran a daycare. One of the kids was named Dylan. Dylan was really smart and somewhat rebellious, but not a jerk kid. We all liked him, but he was always a bit off. So one day he's sitting at the kitchen table, eating his snacks. The other kids were done and it was just him and my mom. He had some carrots left but was out of juice. My mom asked him if he wanted more. His response freaks us out today, almost 20 years later. Keep in mind, he was something like 7 when this happened. I was visiting and making a sandwich, and this shit happened. "Well, miss, I'd prefer some whiskey, if you wouldn't mind obliging me." "What, whiskey? No." With a laugh. "Begging your pardon, miss, but it's been a long day. I've come a long way. I'm going to turn in soon and I'm not here to cause any trouble. I've heard you have whiskey and I'm more than happy to pay for it. I'm having a good week." This made no sense. This was a little kid. Our family certainly had no whiskey in the house. We were teetotalers. His parents rarely let him watch TV, let alone old-timey westerns. But here he was, accent and all, sounding like Jeff Bridges in True Grit. My mom, though, just reacted, "No, Dylan, no whiskey for you. Orange juice." She set down a sippy cup of the OJ goodness. "Ma'am, that's just not going to cut it. I came all the way down from Wyoming and by tarnation, I'm a man who wants some whiskey. If you can't provide it, then I'll find someone who can!" He stood up, made for the front door, and got it open before my mom grabbed him. Presto, he was back to normal. "Can I have some juice?" Nothing he did during this time was him. His body language was different, his voice was way lower, and he was totally into what he was doing. It happened a few times after that. At some point later, when I wasn't there, my mom asked him who he was. He gave a name that was something along the lines of Thomas Jeremy Armstrong. She got really into it and started asking about his life. He was apparently lumber prospector and trader who lived his later years somewhere north of Sacramento. We were in Washington State, and had a wife who died from a fever. This kid was in the 1st grade. My mom then asked when he was born and he said, December 14, 1856. It was a Sunday. Sure enough, it was a fucking Sunday. This kinda stuff has always held a mild fascination for me, but this kid was something else. I have no idea how this works, but it's freaky to this day. 7. Me and some of my buddies were smoking hash. Around 3 a.m., we decided to play Bloody Mary and Opos. 2 of my buddies and I went and nothing happened. Then Ali went in, said Bloody Mary and Opos 3 times and came back unscathed. While he was grinning about the fact that we're such fools to believe something would happen, his nose began to bleed. When he realized that, he got into semi-shock and just sat in one place, shivering like it was minus 30 degrees. The rest of us just went numb and sat there trying to contemplate what the fuck just happened. No one slept that night. Edit, I forgot to mention that we were in a hotel room. 8, was spending the night at a friend's house. As a kid, around 12 to 13, parents weren't home, so we decided to go out, do some ding-dong ditching, get into some young angsty debauchery. We get home, and it's around 1 or 2 in the morning. Cue a ringing of the doorbell. Naturally we think it's the cops or a pissed off neighbor. My friend had a small window that looked out onto the front porch that you couldn't really see into from outside, so we took a peek at who was calling at such a late hour. Standing at the door was an old woman in a dress and a young boy in a weird newsy outfit. Both were dressed extremely out of period, as this was the 90s, and my friend had never seen either in the neighborhood before. We ducked because we're a bit freaked. Look again. No less than 10 seconds later and they're both gone. Nobody on the street walking away, no cars driving away, they were just gone without a trace. We did not sleep well. 9. Somewhere out in the mountains near Mammoth, California, as a kid, my dad, myself, and a few family friends were out gazing at the stars. Being as I was from LA, I think it was the first time I'd ever seen the stars without light pollution, so I was fascinated. I pointed out to a cluster of 3 stars and said, "Hey look, it's Orion's belt!" And quote. My father corrected me and showed me that Orion's belt was elsewhere, so I asked, "Well, what constellation is that then?" And pointed back to the one from before. He conceded that it did look very similar to Orion's belt, but that he couldn't tell what it actually was. A little while later, what appeared to be the middle star of the 3 started moving quickly. It zigzagged through the sky for several seconds before its brightness intensified and then just like that it disappeared. To this day the only thing I can think of that it could possibly be was some kind of experimental drone, but this was in the early 90s, and I'm not sure drones existed back then. And if it was a drone, it must have been a damned advanced one because it stood still for long enough that myself and several adults nearby all thought it was a star. Anyway, kinda boring story I guess, but that's the only thing I've ever seen in my life that I really can't explain scientifically. 10. My mom passed when I was 7. Flash forward to middle school. We were at this band clinic thing at my mom's old high school. Each school prepared their own piece with their bands, and then we all got the same piece to do together, if that makes sense. Anyways, we were waiting around to get back on stage to play with everyone, and we're just chatting away as a group. I looked over and at the back of the room was a woman who looked identical to my mom, same red hair, glasses, height, everything. I caught her looking at me a few times and smiling at me. Turned to tell some friends about it, and by the time I looked back, she was gone and I didn't see her after that. Also, I graduated with a French award from high school. I did my walk across the stage, obligatory photo with my department head, who I'm close with, looking out at the crowd. 3 rows behind my dad, stepmom and aunt. I saw the same lady from before. Super eerie but also kinda nice. 11 making toast late one night facing the kitchen bench, eating for a good 5 to 10 minutes. Cleaned up and turned around and every single cupboard door and cutlery drawer were open. They were all closed when I went into the kitchen, and there was no way anyone could have snuck in and done it because I was home alone. I also didn't hear them open in the time I was there. Scared the shit out of me, so I froze. Let it register for a few seconds, then calmly closed everything and went back to my room to hide until daylight. One of a few weird things to happen growing up. 12 Not me, but my stepfather's best friend, call him Jim, has supposedly been experiencing paranormal activity since he was a teenager. He's a court reporter, stepdad was a speech writer, very skeptical and stoic guys. There were countless stories. They got on an elevator full of people in downtown Atlanta, stopped at a floor that was all kinds of wrong 1940s decor, abandoned, dusty, then the elevator went back down and opened on the opposite side of the building. Jim's dog died. A week later the stereo turned on by itself and started playing a song Jim loved to play for his pet. No CD inside. It had snowed the night before and there were paw prints in the backyard leading to the house, but none near the gate. He frequently finds giant piles of coins under his pillow. He lived in London for a time, thinking he'd escaped the spirit, which had begun to scratch him hard on his arms and legs. After 6 months he found a little pile of pennies in his bed, even though he hadn't been carrying American coinage. I personally witnessed one strange event while Jim was around. Was walking down the stairs and felt something whip past my head and heard it hit the wall. Looked down and saw a quarter, dated 1948. I thought my sister was messing with me, but she was down at the lake with everyone else. 13 When I was around 6 or 7 we had a cat that had kittens. We knew it had kittens because it was pregnant and then it wasn't anymore. The problem was that we had no idea where the kittens were. I was wondering about it and looked right at the cat and sort of thought in my mind, "Where are your kittens?" and quote. But without using words, if that makes any sense. Immediately the location came into my mind. It was through some broken boards just above our porch that our cat could jump into from pillars on the side of the porch. I knew that they were there. I walked straight over there, climbed onto the stone pillar and looked through the hole in the boards. The kittens were right there. I've never had a similar experience again in my life. 14. I was watching my parents' dog while they were out of town. My sister passed away in their house about a year prior. While I was there, I witnessed a picture of her fall off the wall. Then I discovered that every picture of her in the house had fallen off the wall, seemingly at the same time. They didn't keep many pictures up in general, so it was only 4 different pictures. I chalked it up to something shaking the house, even though we live in Ohio and I felt nothing. I went home to my apartment. Face up on my desk was a picture of my sister and me that I knew I had packed away. I don't believe in things like this, but this occurred at a time where I was still very much actively grieving the loss of my sister, and it hit me hard. Still can't explain it. 15. I was staying at a hotel while visiting family, and I ran back up to our suite to grab something before heading out to dinner. I noticed my brows were a little off, so I grabbed my eyebrow brush to touch them up, as well as a lip gloss to apply. I sat the brush on top of the chest of drawers, next to the TV stand that sat on the chest. Standing right next to the chest, in front of a mirror on the wall, I applied my lip gloss. I then went to grab my eyebrow brush, but it was gone. I looked under the TV stand on the dresser, underneath the dresser, all over where I knew I had left it, over the course of about 2 minutes. As I finally checked again under the TV, I heard a drop on the carpet like something had fallen, and there, in the middle of the floor at least 4 feet away from the dresser, was my brush. No idea how it got there or how I heard it drop as I was looking for it, several seconds after I noticed it was missing from where I put it. There's no way it would have ended up in that spot from where I set it, and I heard it drop after I saw it was gone from where I put it. This seems like a dumb story, but I slept with the lights on regardless. 16. So much paranormal shit happened to me when I was a kid. One that has always stuck was when I was about 3 or 4 years old. Back then I used to randomly wake up in the middle of the night really often for no known reason. I was still sleeping in my parents' bed at the time, so I would just lay in bed and look around. I swear, every fucking time I'd look at the doorway to the living room, I would see 2 really tall figures standing there. They looked like the old farm couple in that one painting, except they had hollow eyes and they were thinner. They never really didn't do anything but stare back at me at first. One night was especially weird. I woke up as usual and saw them standing there in front of the doorway again. Only this time something felt a bit more off than usual. The ceiling fan was on high and the blades were going so fast that the entire fixture was moving back and forth. I look back at the figures and they have some really dark, creepy grins on their faces. I got scared and buried myself in the blankets, hoping they'd go away. Then all I heard was the ceiling fan spinning even faster. Somehow, the beads at the end of the switches were tapping against the glass light cover furiously. I peeked up out of my covers and the 2 figures were right next to the bed, standing right over me with their ugly smiles. I screamed bloody murder and the glass cover on the light came off and shattered on the ground. My dad jumped out of bed immediately and turned on the light to see what happened, but the 2 figures were gone already. I was crying hysterically and took my mom a long time to calm me down. So much other stuff went on while in lived there. That was the worst house I ever lived in. 17. Hopefully this won't get buried. So almost 3 years ago, I was on holiday with my family and staying at my childhood home. That place has always been creepy, but nothing really scary had happened to me. My older brother was usually the victim. This night I wake up at around 2 or 3 a.m. needing to pee. I was very comfortable cuddling so I tried to just ignore it and fall back asleep. Like half an hour goes by, and I don't feel sleepy anymore and seriously need the bathroom. So I sit up and peek around to find my slippers, and I almost pissed myself when I saw this weird ass person lying in fetal position on the fucking floor. Like, it was black, way darker than normal black, even though it was under this rectangle of light that came from the hallway. Then I proceeded to cry. I felt so scared all of a sudden, and it woke my up, who then had to console me until daylight. The next day, there was nothing on the floor, but I was still extremely creeped out. Since then I have only slept there once, and only with the lights on. It's been over 2 years since I last stepped a foot in my childhood bedroom, and I'm not planning on doing so anytime soon. That's just one, but there's so many things happen there I don't like to spend much time there anymore. Edit. Okay, so here's one of my brothers. When he was 20 we moved to another city, so he was living on his own. He often had friends around, because he found the house creepy. One night, 3 of his friends were there, and they were playing on the PS. They were sitting on a futon, with their feet on the coffee table, and they took a break to chat about whatever. Then, one of this guy's leg moves forward, as if someone was pulling him. Poor guy was almost crying, and he went home shortly afterwards. The others stayed, but they didn't sleep at all. Another time, my brother was cleaning up a bit, and he was stacking up the dishes. An ashtray that was on the counter exploded out of nowhere. He wasn't smoking. That might have an explanation, though. Once, this brother and our youngest brother were cooking something. They had the cupboards all open because they are horribly messy like that. While they are goofing off around the stove, they go to get another plate, and, according to them, this bowl came flying off from the side and almost whacked my little brother in the head. 18. I was having a horrible dream of being stabbed by the beaks of small tiny dinosaurs. They were foaming at the mouth and had an insatiable hunger for my blood. I woke up in a fevered sweat contemplating how utterly real the experience was. I could still feel the aching pain in my back. Whoa, what a fucking close one that was, I thought. I shifted in my bed to try and find the colder fresh piece of blanket that wasn't covered in my body warmth and sweat, in doing so revealing one mighty breaded chicken wing prodding into back. It is true what they say, one ought not to indulge in the kernel late at night. 19. When I was young, probably around 8 to 10, I caught chickenpox. I woke up in the middle of the night one night, and called for my mom. Because little kids can't do shit for themselves when they're sick. A woman came into my bedroom and sat on my bed, and stroked my hair until I fell asleep. For whatever reason, I thought it was my grandmother, but she was dressed funny. When I woke up the next morning, I went downstairs for breakfast, and asked where my grandma was, and, naturally, my mom told me that she was at her house, like she always was. I told my mom she'd been in my room the night before, and my mom laughed and said that I'd just been dreaming. However, my aunt, who tended to believe that sort of thing more, was babysitting me that day. The upside to chicken pox meant there was no school for me, and I told her the story. She asked me to describe the weird outfit, and it was a nurse's outfit from the 50s/early 60s. My family knew the previous owners of the house. The wife was a nurse in the 50s, and had died a few months previously. Can I say with 100% certainty that I had an encounter with a spirit? No. But it's certainly a spooky coincidence. 20. Kinda late here, but anyway, when I was about 12, I had a very vivid dream that I was at the funeral of a young child, but no one could see me. At some point in the dream, I figured out that the dead child was my older sibling. As far as I knew at the time, I was the eldest. Woke up raving to my dad about being there and quat. I saw them bury the older one, etc. before just passing out. I remember my parents being really shaken when I woke up, and they revealed to me that my mom had had a miscarriage a couple of years before I was born, and never told me. Freaked me out. To this day, I get a little creeped out when my dream's a little more vivid than normal.